Now, in just a few hours, Kenya will join the rest of the world in marking the World Wildlife Day by calling for strong wildlife protection policies against wildlife poaching and the illegal trade of trophies, such as highly priced rhino horns. This forms part of efforts by stakeholders aimed at fortifying wildlife protection in the country as the list of endangered animal species grows longer by the day. Trixingado has that report for you.
World Wildlife Day was set aside to celebrate the importance of world flora and fauna to humanity, raise awareness of the many benefits of wildlife resources and the need for wildlife protection from threats of poaching, and to recognize the important role that sites play in regulating international wildlife trade for sustainable development and human well-being. In Kenya, KWS, which is the leading government agency in wildlife conservation and the Sites Management Authority, has taken the lead in organizing and hosting the celebrations for the past 3 years. Kenya has intensified its wildlife protection efforts, launching a census of elephants and other large animals in Tsavo's Mkomanzi Conservation Area on the border with Tanzania. The aim, according to officials, is to establish the populations of elephants and other large mammals to assess the impact of poaching and climate change. Another conservation effort being employed by the service is lion tracking through fence maintenance and satellite monitoring. Through other conservation partners, 5 lions in the park have so far been fitted with satellite radio collars to monitor their movement and location. IFAW has so far donated 6 satellite collars and 18 camera traps to KWS. The equipment will help improve lion monitoring and hence better inform officials. These conservation efforts come as the world marks the 2017 World Wildlife Day under the theme Listen to the Young Voices. Trixingado, KTN News, Nairobi.
All right, so let's have a conversation about this. I know a lot of people are asking questions about this particular day, Wildlife Conservation Day. So we're speaking to Daudi Sumba, Vice President, Program Design at Africa Wildlife Foundation. Sir, thank you for speaking to us on Worldview this afternoon.
Thank you very much.
So what is this day all about?
So the World Wildlife Day was created by the United Nations General Assembly to set aside a special day where we can commemorate our wildlife heritage as a people of the world. And the idea is that on this day, we would use it to create awareness and educate people on the importance and the value of wildlife and our heritage as wildlife across the globe.
How is that going, the educating people and letting them know how important wildlife is?
I think it's just the beginning, because this is the 3rd commemoration of the World Wildlife Day, started in 2015. So these are the beginnings, and we're beginning to put the message out. I think with time, people will be correctly educated as the day gets to be known and the day gets to become mainstream among calendar of events across the globe.
Yeah. Unfortunately for you, you may not have that much time because several countries are concerned about the number of poachings that are going on. So what time frame are you looking at with respect to helping people to understand the importance of this and protect animals and protect endangered species?
I think the need to protect wildlife species is urgent, very urgent, and therefore awareness programs and awareness creation is also urgent. I think many conservation organizations the world over and many governments are doing their best to begin to create this movement of awareness and education to educate people in the need for wildlife. I think even in this country, in Kenya, many more people are much more aware today of the issues around wildlife loss than they were a few years ago. Why? Because many conservation organizations, the media, and others have played a key role in bringing this agenda to national public spotlight. And people really know. So we need to accelerate these efforts so that we reach a much wider breadth of people with the message and impress on them the urgency with which we need to act before we lose all our species.
So this year, there's a group of people that you're specifically targeting, the youth.
Yes.
Why are they so critical to this conversation?
For obvious reasons. That if you look at the demographics of the world, okay, 1.2 billion people across the earth are youth, ages 15 to 24. In Africa, that's 220 million people.
That's a lot of people.
That's a lot of people. And so if we do not target these people, who should be the future custodians of this resource? And in fact, if you look at youth unemployment in many parts of the world, it's very, very high. And unless these people are actively engaged to understand the value of this resource, they will most likely become participators in destroying this resource for short-term gain. So as custodians of tomorrow, as the generations of tomorrow, the decision makers of tomorrow, we believe that these people must be engaged, because the future of wildlife does not lie in our hands. The future of wildlife lies in the hands of this young generation.
That puts you in a very difficult position, because you're trying to target the youth, but then there's a precedent that's already being set by the current generation. We've seen people getting into forests, we've seen people throwing whatever it is they want to think into like rivers, seas and all that. There's already a precedent being set, and at the back of their mind they're like, I mean, this is not as important as you're being made to think.
I think this generation, the current generation, has sinned against the next generation. There's a common adage that...
Does that include you and me?
We all have. I think there's a current adage that says that we borrow the earth from our children. Okay? So what we have borrowed from our children, we have not been good stewards of. And I think that it's time for us to make an about turn and to demonstrate the value of conservation, the value of wildlife, to this next generation, not just in terms of the intrinsic beauty value, but in terms of ecosystem services, in terms of sustaining life, in terms of providing employment and jobs, and these other issues that are critical for the youth. We need to demonstrate that so that we can interest them to become greater stewards of that particular future.
Dowdy, these are millennials. You have a very hard task ahead of you to convince them on the importance
of... But you see, if you look at how the world is shaping today, the impacts of climate change, they are felt by millennials and non-millennials alike. When there's drought, it affects millennials and non-millennials. When there's hunger, it hits both sides.
Everyone,
so we need to get involved.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Kenya specifically. From your view, where does Kenya stand? How much effort has Kenya put in terms of conserving the environment and wildlife?
Kenya, I must say, is one of the great African conservation countries. And there are not many. There are few of the great African conservation countries. Kenya ranks up very highly. If you look at our conservation estate, it's very reasonable. It's more than 10% of the total land area of this country under conservation. You know?
What, 10%?
More than 10%. If you consider the national parks, the game reserves, and the conservancies and other community-based natural resource management areas, we are doing more than 10%. So
is 10% okay?
That's okay. I mean, not bad. You know, many countries may not even achieve that. The Aichi targets, which the world has agreed on, are reasonable in the mid-10s. So, you know, we're not doing badly. I think we're about to bypass the Aichi targets.
If I were you, I would make it look so bad. So
no, we are not doing badly. You know, I think Kenya has done well in many aspects. If you look at rhino conservation, we've had a rebound of rhino populations from near extinction. Now we have 1,000+ rhinos in this country. If you look
Are you sure you really want to say that on TV? Because the people are just watching and just saying, oh, so they have this.
True, because there are many countries which have zero. They've lost everything. If you look at elephants, from a historic low of about 9,000, we've rebounded. We are now around about 30,000. So we are not doing badly, but and again, we are not doing very well. So the challenges that we really must address if our conservation has to continue being viable.
Okay. So apart from the youth and the government, which other stakeholders are you engaging this year?
Okay, so we are engaging, of course, the development partners. We are engaging private sector. Even the old, we are engaging the old. Because the old today are the ones making the decisions that impact on the key drivers of threats for conservation. They're the ones deciding how land is used. The ones deciding about urbanization. They're deciding about the use of money. All of those are old people deciding. And we have to engage them so that we can change the narrative and the decision-making and the policy environment to suit a more conducive environment for wildlife going forward. So we're engaging everybody.
So tell me, just before I let you go, tell me about that celebration that would be held on Friday. So
this celebration will be at Afra National Stadium. That's where Kenya has chosen to convene. I think it's also in celebration of Lake Nakuru National Park, the wonderful biodiversity and wildlife around that area. and will be led by, of course, the ministry and led by Kenya Wildlife Service. Okay. So we're expecting that many people would come.
Anyone is invited?
Everybody is invited. That's why we put it at Afra National Stadium. Every Tom, Dick, and Harry out there, any lover of wildlife, please welcome. Come celebrate with us. Come love wildlife. Give it some love for once, so that it's not always the negative story of that we are losing wildlife. But let's celebrate what we've got.
We have.
Because it's beautiful. People come from all over the world to see what we have. But we, the Kenyans, stay in our homes and only talk. Let's come out, let's celebrate, let's enjoy the wildlife, it's ours.
Daudi Sumba, Vice President, Program Designer at Africa Wildlife Foundation. Sir, thank you so much for speaking to us.
Thank you very much, Lydia.